When I received an anonymous letter with coordinates and the inscription, "Open the third cabinet from the left," I thought it was someone's joke. But inside was a tape recorder with a recording where a man pleaded, "I'm not dead. I'm just not where I'm supposed to be. Find my photograph, it will explain everything. I'm Scott Langston, a crime reporter for an independent publication in San Diego. I've been in this business for a long time, usually handling cases the police closed too quickly. But this case came to me on its own. The envelope had no return address. Inside were coordinates pointing to a single-story former school building, long since converted into an archive. On the back of the sheet was a phrase, "Third cabinet from the left." I know you can see what others ignore. No signature, no date. The paper felt strange between my fingers, slightly waxy, like it had been exposed to moisture and then dried. The handwriting was meticulous, each letter formed with careful precision, almost mechanical in its perfection. I ran my fingertips over the ink, feeling the slight indentation where the pen had pressed. Whoever wrote this wanted to make sure their message would last. I drove there the next day. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked parking lot of the archive building. The place looked abandoned, peeling paint, windows reflecting the orange glow of sunset, a forgotten relic of institutional architecture. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but the gate hung open, its lock long since broken. The archive is closed to visitors, but I had help from an acquaintance, Ken Reynolds, who worked there. We'd crossed paths years ago when I was investigating a cold case from the 80s. He owed me a favor after I kept his name out of an article about misplaced evidence. 15 minutes, Scott. That's all I can give you, Ken said as he unlocked the side entrance. He was nervous, constantly checking his watch. The security system is down for maintenance, but I could still lose my job for this. I'll be quick, I promised. Ken led me through a maze of corridors. The smell hit me immediately, that distinctive scent of aging paper, dust, and the faint sweetness of deteriorating adhesive. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, some dead, creating pools of shadow between harsh illumination. Our footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor. "What are you looking for anyway?" Ken asked, his voice hushed despite us being alone. I showed him the note. "Third cabinet from the left. Mean anything to you?" Ken frowned. "There are hundreds of cabinets in here. It must be in a specific section," I said. "Somewhere significant." He thought for a moment. "The isolation room, maybe. It's where they keep sensitive materials, things that need special climate control or restricted access." The isolation room was at the far end of the east wing. Ken unlocked it with a key from the jangling mass on his belt. The room was smaller than I expected, perhaps 15 feet square, with metal filing cabinets lining the walls. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow light. "Third from the left," Ken murmured, pointing to a cabinet against the far wall. I approached it slowly, feeling a strange reluctance, as if something was pushing back against me. The cabinet looked identical to the others, standard government issue, battleship gray, with a slight rust bloom around the handle. But as I got closer, I noticed something odd. The dust pattern around it was different. While the other cabinets had a uniform layer of grime, this one showed signs of recent disturbance, fingerprints on the handle, scuff marks on the floor in front of it. I pulled it open and immediately caught that smell, dust, yes, but with an undertone of something burnt, like electrical components that had overheated. The cabinet seemed to contain standard archive boxes, each neatly labeled with alphanumeric codes. But on the bottom shelf sat a box that caught my attention. It was marked D for 91B, closed until further notice, in red ink rather than the black used on the others. "What's this classification mean?" I asked Ken, pointing to the label. He peered at it, frowning. D-series are usually personnel records, but the red mark means it's restricted. I didn't even know we had anything like that here. I pulled out the box. It was lighter than it looked, and something inside shifted when I moved it. The lid wasn't sealed, just resting on top. Inside was an old cassette recorder, a Sony from the late 90s, with a tape already loaded, and a manila envelope containing what felt like photographs. "Did you know about this?" I asked Ken. He shook his head, genuinely puzzled. "This section predates my time here. I started in 2004. I pressed play on the recorder. The mechanism whirred to life, the sound jarringly loud in the quiet room. A voice emerged, male, trembling, panicked. "My name is Richard Hale. If you're hearing this, then I really have disappeared. I'm not dead. I am who I am. But in the photographs, that's not me. Please, look at them. You'll see. They're looking in the wrong direction. They remember the wrong things. They're all forgeries, but I'm there. Somewhere inside." The voice paused, and I heard heavy breathing, the sound of papers shuffling. I tried to tell them. At first, just small inconsistencies. The reflection in the glass of the conference room showed me sitting at the table, but I was standing by the door. Then more. My shadow falling against the flow of light. My tie knotted differently in the bathroom mirror than what I felt around my neck. They sent me to Dr. Mercer. Said I was having episodes. Prescribed medication. But the medication just made it worse. It made me see both versions at once, the me that's here and the me that's elsewhere. Another pause. A door closing in the background of the recording. Someone's coming. I don't have much time. The photographs are the key. Each one captures a moment when the split happened. Look at the angles, the perspectives. They don't match. I'm being erased, replaced by something else. If you find this, it means they've completed the process. Find the original negatives. There's a pattern in them. The recording cut off abruptly. Static filled the small room, then silence as the tape reached its end. Ken had backed away during the playback, his face pale. "Scott, I don't like this. What the hell is this about?" "I'm not sure yet," I said, opening the manila envelope. The photographs slid out, about 20 of them, all standard 4x6 prints. They appeared ordinary at first glance: office staff, what looked like company meetings, group portraits at company picnics. All dated between 1995 and 1997, according to the timestamps. But as I flipped through them, I noticed what Hale had been referring to. In each photo was the same man, average height, thinning hair, wireframe glasses, unremarkable in every way except for one detail. He looked wrong. Not in any obvious way, but in subtle details that created a sense of unease. While everyone else in the photos seemed naturally posed, this man, Hale, presumably, appeared somehow disconnected from the scenes. In one image of an office Christmas party, everyone was looking at a Santa in the corner, but Hale was staring directly at the camera. In another, a group shot on steps outside a building, Hale's shadow fell at a slightly different angle than those around him. In a third, where everyone was squinting in bright sunlight, his eyes were wide open, unaffected. "Do you know who Richard Hale is?" I asked Ken. He shook his head. "Name doesn't ring a bell. But if he worked here, it would have been way before my time." I examined the photos more carefully. No obvious signs of tampering were visible, no cut lines, no unnatural blurring around edges. I held one up to the light, checking for signs of it being a composite image. Nothing. To all appearances, these were genuine, unaltered photographs. "I need to take these," I said. Ken looked uncertain. "That's against protocol. Archive materials aren't supposed to leave the building. This isn't official archive business, Ken. Someone put this here specifically for someone to find. I think that someone was me." He hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But I never saw you, and you never saw that box. Deal?" "Deal." I carefully placed the recorder and photos back in the box and tucked it under my arm. As we left the isolation room, I noticed something strange. In the glass of a framed fire evacuation plan on the wall, I caught our reflections. Ken was turning to lock the door, but my reflection was still facing forward, watching me. I blinked, and the reflection synchronized again. A trick of the light, I told myself. Hale's paranoid ramblings were getting to me. Back at my apartment that evening, I spread the photographs across my dining table. Under better lighting, the inconsistencies were even more apparent. In one photo of an office gathering, Hale was slightly out of focus while everyone else was sharp. In another, his clothing had subtle differences, everyone else in short sleeves on what was clearly a hot day, while he wore a light jacket. I decided to look into Hale himself. A few calls to contacts, some database searches, and I had his story, or what existed of it officially. Richard Hale, 42, Analytics Department at Meridian Research, a government contractor. Reported missing in November 1997. Last seen leaving work on a Friday evening. His car remained in the company parking lot. Security cameras showed him exiting the building, walking toward his car, and then, nothing. He simply vanished from the frame. The investigation had been brief. No signs of foul play, no demands for ransom, no unusual activity in his financial records. The case was classified as a voluntary disappearance after 3 months and officially closed after a year when no new leads emerged. But one detail caught my attention. In the 6 months leading up to his disappearance, Hale had made 12 separate official requests to access the company's photo archives, specifically, photographs that contained him. The requests were logged in the case file but dismissed as irrelevant by investigators. I called a friend at the police department, Detective Sarah Chen. We'd worked together before, she'd leak information to me on stalled cases, and in return, I'd share leads that came through my network of sources. A 1997 missing persons case. That's ancient history, Scott, she said when I explained what I was looking for. I know, but something about it feels off. The guy disappeared without a trace, and now I'm getting anonymous tips about him. Anonymous tips? Her interest perked up. From who? That's the thing, I don't know. But they led me to these photographs, and they're strange. Strange how? I struggled to articulate it. Like they've been altered, but not in any way I can technically prove. I need to see the original case file, the complete one. And I need to know if the physical evidence is still in storage somewhere. She sighed. I'll see what I can do. But no promises, and you didn't hear it from me. I decided to check the originals of the photographs. The next day, I returned to the archive. Ken was reluctant to let me in again, but I convinced him it would be the last time. The closed section, where would they keep film negatives from the 90s? I asked. Sub-basement, climate-controlled storage. But you'll need special access. I can't get you in there. Can you at least tell me who can? Ken thought for a moment. Martha Winters. She's been here since the 80s. Manages the preservation department. Martha Winters was a stern woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. I found her in her office, surrounded by documents in various stages of preservation. I don't normally allow access to the climate-controlled archives, she said after I explained my request. Especially not to civilians. I decided honesty might be the best approach. I'm investigating a cold case. A man named Richard Hale disappeared in 1997, and I have reason to believe the answers might be in photographs stored here. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her hand tighten slightly around the pen she was holding. Hale. The name sounds familiar. He worked at Meridian Research. Made several requests to access company photographs before he vanished. She nodded slowly. I remember now. Odd little man. Very particular about record keeping. He used to come here sometimes, said he was conducting an audit of their visual archives. Did anything strike you as unusual about him? Martha removed her glasses, polishing them with a cloth from her desk drawer. He was meticulous. Would spend hours looking at the same images. Once, I found him in the viewing room just staring at his own reflection in the glass of a picture frame. When I asked if he needed help, he said, "It moved before I did." Gave me chills. Do you know where his personal archives might be kept? Anything labeled with his name? She hesitated, then stood up. Follow me. Martha led me through several secure doors, each requiring a different key from the massive ring she carried. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended into the sub-basement. The lighting here was different, softer, with a reddish tint to protect the sensitive materials. We keep personalized collections in a separate section, she explained as we walked. Sometimes departments or individuals request their own archives be maintained independently. We reached a room filled with specialized storage cabinets. Martha consulted a logbook, then moved to a cabinet marked with a simple R on its drawer. If it's here, it would be in this section. She pulled open the drawer and ran her fingers along the folders until she stopped at one labeled R.Hale/private. Here we are. I'm not supposed to let these leave the viewing room, but... She glanced around, then handed me the folder. 1 hour. That's all I can give you. The viewing room is through that door. Make sure you wear these. She handed me a pair of cotton gloves. The viewing room was small, with a light table in the center and a magnifying glass mounted on an adjustable arm. I carefully opened the folder. Inside were dozens of negatives and contact sheets, all meticulously labeled with dates and event descriptions. What I found confirmed my suspicions. The original negatives showed the same inconsistencies as the prints, but even more pronounced. In every image where Hale appeared, there was something off. In group shots, he was looking at the camera while others were looking elsewhere. In some, he appeared to stand slightly apart from the group, creating an unnatural gap. In others, he was positioned unnaturally close to the lens, as if he had moved at the last second. One photograph in particular caught my attention. It showed an office gathering, perhaps 20 people arranged in rows. Hale stood at the back, near a window. The light from the window created a strange effect. While everyone else's shadows fell to the left, his fell directly backward, as if the light source for him alone was the camera itself. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in pencil in tight, controlled handwriting, they copy the reflection. Not the person. I quickly photographed everything with my phone before returning the folder to Martha. She seemed relieved to see me go, and I wondered if she knew more than she was letting on. Back home, I sent the images to a friend who specialized in photographic analysis for a national magazine. Check these for signs of manipulation, I wrote. Anything unusual in terms of lighting, shadow, or perspective. While waiting for his response, I pieced together more of Hale's life. Former colleagues described him as brilliant but socially awkward. He'd never married, lived alone in a small apartment, and had few friends. His work involved pattern recognition in large datasets, looking for connections that others missed. 3 days later, my friend's analysis arrived. His findings were baffling. He'd found no evidence of digital manipulation, but the physical characteristics of the images defied explanation. The angle of light falling on subject Hale doesn't correspond with other objects in the frame, he wrote. In some images, the focal depth is inconsistent, he's in focus when he should be blurred, or vice versa. Most disturbing, the perspective lines of the background don't converge properly around him, as if he was photographed from a slightly different angle than everyone else. It's as if he was inserted into the frame not physically, but as a reflection, from another plane. As I was reading this analysis, my doorbell rang. A courier had delivered another envelope, no stamps, no return address. Just my name and address in the same precise handwriting as the first note. Inside was another photograph. This one showed me, standing in the parking lot of the archive building, looking up at the windows. But I had never been outside that day. I'd entered through the side door with Ken and left the same way. On the back of the photo, "You've become observed. Look in mirrors carefully." I immediately pulled up the security footage Ken had sent me from the archive. On the day of my visit, the exterior cameras showed an empty parking lot during the entire time I was inside. But in one frame, reflected in the glass of the entrance doors, was a figure that looked like me, staring directly at the camera. I checked the interior footage. During the time stamp when I was supposedly outside, the cameras showed me talking with Ken in the isolation room. But in the reflection of a glass cabinet in the background, I could see myself, standing still, staring directly at the camera for nearly a minute while my actual self was in motion, speaking to Ken. I found the spot in the archive where this discrepancy occurred and studied the cabinet glass. It reflected me normally at first, but as I watched, I noticed a lag, a split-second delay between my movements and those of my reflection. When I blinked, my reflection remained still, eyes open, for just a moment too long. Now, sitting at my desk, I have a board covered with these photographs. They haven't changed, at least, most haven't. But one appeared recently, slipped under my door while I slept. It shows me in my kitchen. Behind me stands a figure, seen only in profile. The handwritten note reads, "Richard is watching. Be careful with the exposure." I've started to notice other discrepancies. Sometimes, when I pass a store window, my reflection continues walking for a step after I've stopped. In video calls, there's a lag between my movements and what appears on screen, not electronic delay, but as if my image is deciding whether to follow me. Last night, I woke to find all the mirrors in my apartment covered with condensation, as if someone had been breathing on them. When I wiped one clear, I saw myself sleeping in bed, though I was standing at the mirror. What if photographs aren't just a way to capture a moment, but a window through which someone can remain, even when they're no longer present? What if Hale found a way to exist in that space between reality and reflection, and now he's showing me the way in? Or perhaps the more frightening question, what if I'm already there, looking back at myself, wondering which version is real?